Hi, welcome to How to Paraphrase Without Plagiarizing. I'm Miss Rowland from Springfield Central High School, and today we're going to talk about how you can read information from a source and paraphrase it. Now, I know that you know the term paraphrase. Paraphrase is any time that you rewrite information in your own words. But you know from our plagiarism lessons that even if you put something in your own words, you have to cite it because plagiarism is not just the stealing of words, it's also the stealing of ideas. But first step first, we want to practice how to paraphrase, and then we'll talk about the citation. Now, paraphrasing, unlike what a lot of people might assume, is not just changing one or two words in a sentence. Teachers know this trick, so don't just use a thesaurus and change one or two words. That is still plagiarizing. It's also not just rearranging pieces of the sentence. You want to make sure that you read the content and then you restate it just using your own words. So you really do have to process what the information is and be able to understand it in order to paraphrase correctly. Paraphrasing is communicating the facts the way you yourself would say them. And today we're going to talk about how to do that. So let me give you a step-by-step description on how you can paraphrase. First, read the sentence or the passage. And when I say passage, I really just mean one or two sentences. You're not going to read a whole page and then try to paraphrase that. That would be more like a summary. We're just talking about taking individual facts and restating them in your own words. Now, when you read that sentence or passage, look for any words or phrases that you don't know the meaning of and look them up. Make sure that you understand what the sentence is trying to say. Second, cover that original text with your hand. This seems like a really strange direction, but trust me, and I'm going to explain why we do this. So you're going to read it, you're going to try to understand what the sentence is saying, and then you're going to cover up that sentence with your palm. Third, imagine that a classmate, someone in this class that you're in right now, asks you, what does that sentence mean? I don't get it. Because the next step is the most important part. I want you to imagine how you could explain the sentence to your classmate. Now, obviously, your classmate isn't going to want to hear you just reread the sentence. He or she is honestly saying to you, I don't get it. How would you explain it to him or her? Write that sentence down. I don't want you to worry about grammar or spelling or punctuation at this point. I just want you to get the information down. And last but not least, you're going to go back and rewrite that sentence, tweaking anything you need to tweak, polishing it so that now your teacher is going to read it. So let's see this in action. Here is an excerpt from President Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. Now, this uses a lot of fancy schmancy language, and most times when you are paraphrasing something, it's not going to be this dense, but I want to kind of take the most extreme situation, and we're going to break down how we would deal with it. Most cases, the sentences that you're going to read aren't going to be this difficult. So here's our excerpt. 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we reread the sentence or the passage. Do we have any words or phrases we don't understand? Probably. This is pretty dense language, right? We're talking about the 1800s. So go through anything that you're not sure what it means, look up. So for instance, what does 40 mean? Well, you may not realize this, but a score is 20 years. So if we take 4 times 20 plus 7, that means Lincoln was saying 87 years ago. What about our fathers? What do they mean when he says our fathers? Well, he's talking about the people who founded America, the forefathers of the United States of America, our ancestors. What does the term new nation mean? Well, essentially, it is the creation of the United States. It was a new country with new rules and a new type of government. What does it mean if something is conceived? If you look it up, you'll realize that conceived is a synonym for created, right? So if our nation was conceived in liberty, it was created with the understanding that we would have these principles in our new country. And what is liberty? Liberty just means freedom. So if something is conceived in liberty, it is created with the hope that we will have a free country, that people will be free here. And last but not least, what does the word proposition mean? Well, proposition is an argument, a belief, or a theory. Now, I just want to stop you here. I know already some of you have decided, no way are you going to do this with every single sentence that you have to paraphrase. Again, I'm using a really extreme example. Most sentences that you're going to read, you're not going to have to look up any words or phrases at all, but sometimes it'll happen, and you want to make sure that you completely comprehend what the original writer is trying to say. So should you come across anything that seems confusing, make sure you look up those pieces. Our next step, reread that passage, inserting our definitions that we now know. So now it's a little clearer what Lincoln was trying to say. Once we've read it, we want to cover that text with our hand. Here's why. When you are trying to recall a piece of text, your automatic instinct is going to be to look back down at that text. And unfortunately, your brain is just going to want to grab onto words that are already there. We don't want you doing that, because the idea behind paraphrasing is processing the information and restating it using your own words. If you look at the text, you're just going to read the words that are there. We want you to understand what the meaning is. So by covering up the text, you then are forced to have to think back in your memory as to what you imagined when you read that passage. Now, if you find when you cover it up that you can't remember what the sentence was or what the passage was about, just take your hand off, reread it again, figure out what is this sentence about, cover it back up, because it's going to help us with our next step, which is imagining that a classmate asks you what it means. Focus on the meaning, not the words. The reason why I want you to imagine a classmate is twofold. First, if you're talking to someone that's your own age, your peer, you're not going to try to throw in a lot of fancy schmancy language like you might if you're writing something for a teacher. I want you to use just your own language that you're comfortable with. But secondly, if you're focusing on explaining it to your classmate, you're not going to just reread what the sentence originally said. You are going to try to explain it. If your classmate says to you, I don't know what this means, and you just read the sentence to them out loud, that's not helping them. You want to get in the mindset that you're trying to explain it to someone else, and someone that's a lot like you. Therefore, don't use the fancy schmancy language that's in the original text. Instead, use how you would describe that concept. Use vocabulary that you automatically use in your everyday life. Are you actually talking to a classmate? No. Most of the time when you're paraphrasing, you're going to be writing things down. But I just want you to have that imaginary classmate in your head and then write down what you would say. Again, don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about spelling. Don't worry about punctuation. We're going to deal with that in a minute. Just get down the concept and make sure that you covered what the sentence or the passage was trying to communicate. Then rewrite the sentence. Now you're going to pay attention to grammar and spelling and punctuation. And keep in mind that your audience for your sentence is your teacher. It's not going to be your classmate. So you do want to make sure that your sentence makes sense, that you're using appropriate formal language. Once you do that, check the original passage. Look at what you had read and compare it to what you wrote. Is it the same thing? If it is, success. You have paraphrased. So let's check our example. Here's our original passage. Here's our paraphrase. Are they essentially the same? Well, our paraphrase is a little bit shorter, and maybe it's not as flowery as Lincoln's language, but the essential meaning is the same. What am I forgetting? Those of you that remember our plagiarism lesson, what do I need to do as a last step? You're right, add the citation. So right at the end, we're just going to put our author's last name in parentheses, followed by our punctuation. Remember, plagiarism isn't just the stealing of words, it's also the stealing of ideas. So even if you paraphrase, you do have to give credit to your original source. So great job. As a review, to paraphrase, read the sentence or the passage. Look up any words or phrases you don't understand. Second, cover that original text with your hand. That's to prevent you from just restating the original words. Third, write what the passage means as if you were explaining it to a classmate. And then finally, polish that sentence, check it for accuracy, and last but not least, add that citation. And that's it. That's how to paraphrase without plagiarizing. If you have any questions, you can always shoot me an email. My email address is at the top of the screen.